You're hanging out in the House of Sunny podcast, where it's always sunny, mostly because of your host, comedian and YouTuber, Sunny Loman. Want to know what Sunny and her friends are thinking about this week? Well, here she is, Sunny Loman.
Welcome. I'm here with Sidekick Doug from The Rational Capitalist and Ashley. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
We're going to get into a bunch of news, including tariffs, social media stuff, China, drugs, the Oscars. But first, it's voicemail time, guys.
That's all we're going to cover today?
Yeah, right. We may not cover any of that. We'll start with one topic, see how it goes.
Right.
All right.
All right. Let's do jokes.
We got some voice messages.
Honey, hi. I am super, super excited to tell you that I am starting up a new restaurant. Yes, it's true. And I'm going to have a dish that serves curry over French fries. It's called, get ready, Curry on My Wayward Spud. And yes, there will be peas when you are done.
Yes. Love it.
Even my dog
Kansas reference.
Even her dog thinks it's funny, she says. Well, good. She's got a funny
good.
dog. Good
I did not see that coming.
Good to have a dog with a sense of humor. All right. Okay, here's our next. This is not a joke. I'm reading. Google Voice transcribes this, and
Yeah.
it's a statement, so we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Is it okay for bakers to not make NRA cakes now?
Can gay bakers not make NRA cakes?
Absolutely not.
They have to make them
They have to make them.
in the shape of a gun with real bullets.
Right, or it could be a picture of a phallus shooting bullets or something like that. Maybe we compromise.
Unfortunately, believing in freedom is not a protected class. So, actually, I think they can get away with not making the cake.
Well, I say just arrest everybody. Just let's get it over with.
Get it over with? Well,
Yeah.
that's been your theory all along, that in order to, make life good for everybody, we all just need to be caged.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then we'd all be safe.
Yeah. Doug's
We'd
been
have a federal
advocating that for
agent.
years.
Assign a federal agent to every individual and let him live outside your house. You live in a cage. He lets you out. He tells you what to eat,
Yeah.
what you can do, who you can transact with, what you wear. If it's cold out, he makes you wear gloves. You can't drink soda. That's against the law.
If you're sad, he'll inject you with Ritalin.
Right. He gives you Adderall or some licensed drug.
If you get sick, he'll figure out what to give you. You don't get to decide.
Yeah, you go to that's universal health care.
Yeah. I mean, if this is what we believe in, this is what we believe in, right?
Yeah.
If people
then we're all safe.
take care of themselves, we should just be caged.
Mm-hmm.
How do you cage the federal officer who's in charge of us?
He gets caged when he goes home.
Okay. Okay. You've thought about this. This is figured out.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole protocol. He gets out of his cage to cage you, and then when he goes home, he gets into his cage, and a night shift takes over. So we just go in shifts.
How do you get one of these cush jobs where you get to get out of your cage once in a while?
You got to know the leader.
Got to be a part of the party, the right party.
Yeah, right. As always, you just need to be connected in the party. It's basically hereditary. So we're kind of going back to monarchy, like all socialist dictatorships eventually devolve into hereditary monarchy.
That's
so
right.
So we'll just do that. Chelsea Clinton can control it all.
Chelsea
Since
Clinton.
the Clintons are now. Yeah, and the Bush family.
I trust her to get it right. I really do.
Well, she's an expert on everything. She's a philosopher king.
Right. We need those. All right. Here is the last message.
What you get when you cross two bloodsuckers. Bella Pelosi. Enjoy.
Is that a political joke?
Bella who?
Pelosi? Who would be Bella?
I was thinking of Bella Lugosi.
I see.
The monster actor?
Yes. Okay, so he's mashing up the monster with Pelosi.
Yeah,
Nancy
I like
Pelosi.
that. That's pretty
That's
good.
a good
That's
joke.
deep. Very good.
Nice.
Well done, sir.
Good integration. All right.
It's deep. We got smart people watching or listening to the show.
We sure do. Good jokes, everybody. Call in
Not
next.
necessarily funny people, but deep people.
Deep. Okay. Call the number 707-681-5834 if you want to leave us a voice message or a joke. We like to play them. And we play all of them, as you can see. Okay. So
We have no standards.
we have no standards. We play them all. We just recorded a show yesterday on Oscar fashion. You can see that at YouTube. I recommend that you see it on YouTube because I made the video and it's got pictures. Obviously, it's about fashion, so you got to see the pictures. But we did that as just a little special episode this week, so check that out. And I thought we could start off today just kind of continuing to talk about the Oscars a little bit because the news came out that the ratings are down 19% from last year.
Wow.
And it's the worst in history ratings wise. And you know, part of it is the movies sucked.
Yes.
I mean,
There was no blockbusters.
there were no movies that I was like, oh yeah, like I hope they win. I mean, even last year there was La La Land, which was so great. And of course, La La Land, the best movie in a decade, lost to some crappy ass movie about a gay black man. Because we're PC, but
never get
still,
too much of that.
you still want to tune in because you loved La La Land, whatever. But this year, I mean, admittedly, I didn't see all the pictures, but there really wasn't anything.
The only one I know about is I started reading Rex Reed's review of a movie about a fish man.
Well, that's The
That
Shape of Water, and that
Meets a woman that cleans urinals.
yes.
Is that what it's about? I stopped after that. That's all I know about the Oscars.
I just read. I never saw The Shape of Water. It won Best Picture. I just read a
Oh, no.
I just read a review of it that was scathing. I mean, I guess the heroine is this sort of dreamy girl who doesn't really live in reality, is late for her job every day, and the villain is a white Trump pussy saying, he actually says the word pussy, like he's so obviously an anti-Trump figure, and it's just like you're supposed to, and then the woman, like, I guess all she does is kind of, she cleans and she masturbates, and then she meets this fish man who she saves.
Wait, back up.
Yeah.
I now want to see this picture. No, just kidding.
Okay, but you saw the woman in the Oscar thing, a woman she's not the prettiest woman on the planet. She's
The lady in the sack.
She was the
Oh,
anorexic lady with the messy Walmart
in the
hair.
smock.
Yeah, Walmart.
And she's masturbating. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
it's supposed to show you her redeeming quality is that she's very lonely.
Ugh.
So
This is horrible.
sounds like a great
These
fucking
people are
movie.
sick.
They really are.
This is just like madness. It's like Bauhaus. It's like Weimar Germany or something. Just like madness and surrealism, and it's just craziness.
Right.
Is there any movies that were about anything?
I think there were a couple. Like, I mean, there was the Blade Runner sequel, which apparently was, I haven't seen that either, but apparently it was really incredible. Wonder Woman. I wouldn't call that like a Best Picture kind of movie, maybe, but dude, I was on a plane last week and I saw All About Eve, which is the first time I've ever seen that movie. And whoa, like I was so blown away by that film. Everything about that film is great. Everything.
Wow.
That's what Hollywood used to do.
Yeah.
And you
it's
come
striking
away,
when you watch those movies.
yeah, I'm still thinking about that movie. And that movie gave me a new concept in my language. The villain is this woman named Eve Harrington. And I've known people like her, like maybe 2 people in my life I've met like her, but they exist. And now knowing and being able to describe her and in a nutshell convey that frustration. She's a woman who who is acting very nice and meek and kind, but underneath she's just a little snake. And the woman that she's targeted figures it out, but no one else.
This is how I think of Ashley, by the way.
Well, she is very nice.
She's a snake.
It's a veneer.
Yeah, it's just
But
phony Minnesota.
The
Yeah,
worst,
watch out, I'll get you.
the worst and frustrating part about it is the main character played by Bette Davis figures it out, but nobody believes her. Right? Because, oh no, she's so nice. And everybody is still supporting this awful woman and helping her to subvert the main character and to like accomplish these really, these, I guess, I don't want to say selfish, but, she wants to be a movie star and she wants to take down the movie star. And anyway, she's just a horrible woman. So anyway, that's the worst, is when no one believes you. Everyone thinks this person's so nice and they're really just an asshole.
Right. It's a little bit of snuffleupagus.
Yeah. So that's what Hollywood used to make. I've walked away with it with this like new understanding of the world and like this new concept, and artistically it was so well put together. And here we are, how many decades and decades later, and it holds up as an artistically really good film.
Right.
So that
and none
is,
of this, well,
but The Shape of Water, no, forget it.
was there anything even artistic about these movies? I mean, because some of these movies can be horrible, but they can be very well made. The cinematography can be sort of beautiful stylistically. So there's often that, but that's sort of the only redeeming quality of some of these movies, possibly.
Yeah.
But I didn't see any of them, so I can't even speak to that.
That happens a lot, and I mean, if that's and I do hang my hat on that sometimes. It's because you gotta go to the movies, you want to enjoy art, but it's really sad that that's kind of what we're looking for. We're excited when but it had great cinematography.
It had pretty colors.
Yeah,
Yeah, like we're scraping the bottom of the barrel.
yeah.
So these are just bad movies. The fashion was terrible.
Well, and let's talk about that. The
cannot stand
fashion
Jimmy
was
Kimmel.
terrible because of the Me Too movement. I think we've established that, and I think it's got to be true because it was so ridiculously bad in the sense that the dresses were either ugly or really boring, and a lot of them were just really boring. Like
It was just a direct attempt so that we don't objectify women in any way. It's a complete assault on the idea of femininity being an object to be to enjoy or to contemplate or to like in any way. It's sort of like flouting that whole idea.
Yeah, and for the Golden Globes, they all wore black to do that. And then it's like funny, it's not organized. It was just, it happened culturally. All these women, when they were out there making their choice for what do I wear to one of the most important nights of my life, and somehow subconsciously they all picked subtle skin tone color, like, the colors were kind of muted, the dresses were a little frumpier than normal, as you noted, Doug, yesterday on the recording. They weren't fitted, they were kind of boxy and less revealing. So less revealing in terms of shape, in terms of body shape.
Right, like just the whole silhouette idea that visually appeals to men, the sort of hourglass shape that's biologically, just appealing when you see it. It doesn't matter who it is. To a man, you see a woman's figure, and even to a woman, I mean, it's just a beautiful figure naturally. And it seemed like we saw none of that in any of the photo. Very rarely did we see that.
Except the girl in the $20
frumpy
Mexican dress from Puerto Vallarta.
She
She was like the only woman who dressed really sexy, and it was awful. Anyway, listen to our podcast. You can get the lowdown on that. But yeah, so bad movies, bad fashion. Then you have this politicization of all those shows, which really is a turnoff. I mean, it just is. Even you just don't want to think about politics, and you just want to watch movies and watch women in pretty dresses and handsome-looking men in their tuxedos and hear some jokes and be entertained by some musical numbers and some movie montages. But no, we gotta
it's all like immigration policy, the Dreamers,
the guns, yeah.
Trump. And what makes it even worse is just the hypocrisy, knowing that here's this town that not only has gone through just the worst sex scandals, pedophilia scandals, but that 90% of the movies and the revenue from these movies are based on
Depravity.
violent video games, depravity. Yeah,
Depravity
like
of
just-
one kind or another. I mean, as I mentioned yesterday on a recording, the Kevin Spacey scandal is him seducing these young boys that, you know, he has access to. And meanwhile, a movie that won a bunch of awards and was nominated a bunch of times is about a older man who has an affair with a younger boy.
So what does that tell you?
Yeah, and they want us to, like, you know, Me Too, Time's Up. It's just, you guys they're just unbelievable hypocrites. And
Yeah, they're disgusting. They're despicable.
They are despicable people. And Jimmy Kimmel is not worthy of this job as host.
No, he's awful.
He is not a very good stand-up. The jokes were okay. He's like a mediocre stand-up with no other skills. At least, like, Jimmy Fallon can fucking sing.
Yeah,
and do impersonations. I mean,
very talented man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fallon is great.
Fallon is
or
talented.
Martin Short.
Martin
or
Short.
Steve Martin.
Wow.
People like that.
Billy Crystal. I mean, you know, the people who used to do the Oscars there were multi-talented people. And now it's like we don't really care about that either, I guess. We just get some hack who does late night shows and virtue signals to the left all the time.
Right. Shamelessly virtue signals. Disgusting. I think that's why they picked him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's like a star because he's trotting his little kid out with the heart defect to say, because my child is sick, you should all be under the yoke of government medicine.
Right. Therefore, my kid is sick. Therefore, universal health care.
Meanwhile, he has the money to buy whatever goddamn treatment he wants for his child.
Sure, he could buy a hospital.
Try being me,
Yeah.
where I'm at the mercy of some fucking Obamacare policy to pay for my medicine.
Right.
And I've been through it. Like, that isn't actually working for me. And and in some cases, there's nothing I can do because the medicine's too expensive. So
anyway, so the Oscars sucked.
Yeah, the Oscars
They
suck.
suck. And
it's
the
down
ratings
20%.
reflect
I
it.
wonder why.
Good.
Shock.
Great.
Shocker. All right. So the most requested story, or the thing people wanted me to talk about, is social media and Facebook and what do we do. And I just had a couple of thoughts about this, and I've said this before, that I really think that Facebook, Google, they are actually going to destroy themselves. And I don't know what is going to come out of those ashes, but something will. I'm not really worried about it. Free market provides. But the other day, and now I tried to switch to DuckDuckGo a while ago. I tried to not use Google, and I couldn't do it because I'd be over on DuckDuckGo. I'd search for something. I didn't get good results. Like, it was a struggle. I
had the same exact experience.
Yeah.
I tried DuckDuckGo and it just didn't work very well.
So for little things, it was fine, but I was always going back to Google for like any kind of serious search. And eventually that was such a pain in the ass, I just went back to Google. So the other day, I was on Google and I was trying to find a website of a political related thing. I put the search in, not on the first page, not on the second page. I go to Bing, first page, first line. I mean, I would think I was literally searching a person's name, looking for their website. And then it happened again about 5 days later with another person that I was looking up, a conservative person. So they're obviously burying conservatives in their search. And I had to go to Bing to get a good search. So to me, this is like they're ruining their product. And they're now flipping it to where, I mean, I tried DuckDuckGo. That wasn't so great. But Bing, like, I think I'm going to Bing because I know that when I search something on there, it's not politically motivated or the results aren't political.
Mm-hmm. Even Yahoo's better.
Mm-hmm. So my point is
Yahoo's
that
a better search.
I'm switching not for political reasons, like, oh, I'm going to boycott Google. I'm switching because Google's starting to suck.
Yeah, they're starting to block whole swaths of content and ideas, certain types of things they won't give you results on.
Right. So the fact that they're doing that, I'm just so not worried. You know, my personally, my biggest concern is YouTube, and what do I do with that? I mean, that's where I primarily post my stuff. If I got kicked off YouTube, I would have no way of getting anything out. So
it seems like it wouldn't be that hard for someone else to have a video hosting service. I know there's Vimeo and there's others. I guess YouTube is just, the McDonald's name brand of that whole space, but it seems fairly straightforward to create a hosting service for video content and for monetizing video content. It seems like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And
it has to happen because with these advertisers, with Google basically kowtowing to advertisers and their own political agenda in-house, they are ruining YouTube for creators. So if nobody's going to create content, what do you have?
Yeah,
and for people who are artistic and really want the freedom of making what they want, they're going to go somewhere else. I mean, they're not just blocking conservatives and conservative voices, although that's primarily it, because of their whole adpocalypse and their demonetization. And I just had every single one of my videos on both my channels demonetized. And I don't have any hope of monetizing them because they changed the rules that you have to have so many viewed hours now before they'll allow you to monetize any videos. And because I didn't make as many videos last year, even though I have, 10 million views on my videos, it doesn't matter because I didn't make enough videos last year. So everything I've ever done was just demonetized. No grandfathering in like, oh, you've got this big following or you've got all these views. That doesn't matter. Everything's been demonetized. I have to earn back my right to monetize by just simply getting more views on my channel.
Well, what does it say about a company or a group of companies that are making so much money that they can afford to just screw over half their customer base? It tells me that they're at an absolute peak where they can afford not to care about making money. I mean, who would do that? Would Kmart or Walmart say, you know what, let's just kick out half the customers in the store right now? I mean, no one would do that. And it just tells me that we're at a transition point where people are going to start to look for alternatives. And these companies at some point are going to feel it in the bottom line.
Yeah. I mean,
also, I wanted to mention, go ahead.
The way that they make money is, they pay creators. So I don't know if you consider us customers, but the people who are creating the content for the customers are either, we're now being kind of stifled, we're being blocked, our videos are being taken down, we're demonetized, the incentives are gone. So then
you are a customer because in essence, you're creating the content by which other people advertise and Google takes a cut of that. So both sides of that transaction are essentially dealing with Google.
Yeah.
And I think like Dennis Prager's lawsuit actually that, and I encourage people to follow this lawsuit because there's aspects of it I don't agree with, just from a pure legal standpoint. But he cites misleading and unfair business practice.
Oh, he does.
And he
Good
says,
for him. I thought it was all antitrust.
No, not at all. He says, constitutes unlawful discrimination under California law as a misleading and unfair business practice and breaches the warranty of good faith and fair dealing implied in Google and YouTube's own terms of use and community guidelines. So what he's saying is like, look, Google and YouTube, you guys put out these terms of use, and then you're violating them. And if you come out and just say, and he even said this on TV the other night, he said, if they just come out and say, look, we're essentially like a left-wing political platform, and we're going to ban any conservatives, even if you're reasonable, then okay, you've stated that, that's your policy, everyone has to deal with that. But you can't come and say, hey, we have this free and open platform and we're only going to go after, pornography or violence or something insane. You can't do that and then have people build a business model around that policy and then flagrantly violate it like they have done with Prager, who, God, the guy's got a university where he's got Harvard and Yale professors, for God's sakes, and
right.
Victor Davis Hanson, and they've taken down or banned Victor Davis Hanson,
Right. Yeah.
lectures, for God's sake.
Right.
So, this is, to me, the stuff of a lawsuit. And he's big enough where he can afford to launch a lawsuit. And I think people should follow that lawsuit carefully. Now, there's aspects of it I don't like, but I think they're just trying to throw everything they can at this to try and get some movement from these companies.
Yeah, and I do think, though, that they've peaked. We're seeing a transition now. They're going to start losing market share. Something's going to pop up, and I mean, it's just an opportunity for anybody. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen because that's what happens, especially on the internet. We've seen it a million times. We think somebody's got it locked down, and they don't. So,
yeah, totally. That's absolutely the history of technology.
I don't know what it's going to be, but because it's not there yet, but it's going to come. It's going to come. Look how fast like Snapchat popped up and became a thing with the youth. I mean, Vine became a thing and then died. I mean, it's just things happen really, really quickly. The next social media platform might not be invented yet. We may not know what it is yet, but when it launches, we'll know a month later, and everybody will be on it, and Facebook will die within a year. I mean, that's how fast it could go.
Right, totally. Because Facebook, they're already losing customers. I think kids are already going off of it.
Kids are not on Facebook.
They're not. They're going to Instagram and some stuff I've never even heard of. There's always some new one that I'm like, what? But the old people like us are still using Facebook to argue about, Trump. All the old people, we get into something like this. It's like, I just want to use Facebook now forever. I don't want to change. I don't want to find anything new, But the kids constantly are reinventing these things and finding new platforms. And I think the freer and more open the platform, the more popular it'll be.
Exactly. I think that's one of the things people love about the internet. No matter what your political persuasion, the freedom of speech and the ability to create, to say fuck, to be edgy, to ride that edge, to be yourself and not be censored is a really, really powerful thing. And the fact that Facebook and Google are censoring people and making even non-conservatives, because like I was saying, with all this stuff, people are having to be careful in how they tag their videos, how they title their videos, what they say in their videos, because the slightest misrepresentation or misunderstanding or if you want to say fuck and you put that in your fucking tags, they're just taking it down because it's not advertiser friendly. And I mean, you are going to lose the youth when you censor, and that seems like, to me, that's what you lose. You lose the American youth. And that's what YouTube's going to do if they don't fucking figure this out. And it started with kowtowing to the advertisers, but Google wanted to do it anyway. So I think, but it's a weird thing to watch these companies, like you said, just like purposely cut their throats. I mean, that's what we're watching. Like, the politics has made these people purposely cut their throats, and they're going to find out that they're not going to survive it. So that's what I think.
They're too rich.
They're too rich. They think it'll go on forever. They're too powerful. But everything that they do is digital and technology. It's based on no one else has done something better than them yet. And,
so that's my advice to other people is really watch what's going on and find other platforms and try and use them and see if they work.
Yeah, if the kids are on Instagram, let's go over to Instagram, figure it out. I mean, that's not going to be what it is. It's not going to be Instagram. Because I've been using Instagram and I find that it's lacking in a kind of depth. It's a much shallower medium. Pictures are cute and everything, but there's no discussion or intellectual. You can't share ideas on Instagram. You can share pictures. It's not a good place to share ideas. So YouTube and Facebook are the idea sharing places. I'd say Twitter is the insult sharing place, but no. But it's those are the two that are idea sharing places, and that's why I think they're the biggest. They're just robust in that sense. And you can also share pictures, and you can also share, everything else. So it's got everything. We'll see what happens. Meanwhile, in China, I just have to tell you guys this crazy story. I mean, you've been hearing about this, but you know this thing that China's doing where they're going to analyze what you're doing on the internet, and with that, and then some algorithms, they're going to categorize their citizens, and the citizens will receive benefits or blacklisting based on their internet habits.
Oh, what could go wrong with that?
Right?
That sounds delightful.
I mean, are you annoyed with Facebook's algorithm that like is keeping out the news you want in your newsfeed? I just imagine that you use that technology and they're going to judge you, not to send you a cute advertisement that they get wrong 90% of the time, but they would actually then control whether you can get a home loan, whether you can get an airline ticket, whether you can book a luxury hotel suite.
Wow.
Yes.
That's incredible. So who's building that technology for them? Probably Facebook and Google. Are they
Right.
building that system for them?
Yeah.
I hear
right.
they are. They have
No,
constructed
really? I thought you were
some
kidding.
of those tools. No. In fact, I posted an article on my page about this that, the tone of the article was these poor companies are between a rock and a hard place because, they have to sort of navigate the waters in a place like, they want access to the market, but they have to kowtow to China's censors. And, they cited some cases where these companies have built some algorithms and tools that China uses. I don't know if they're using it in this case. They're probably not, but
well, they
I
did
doubt
that,
it if these
and then they
companies do it.
and then they bent over when some foreign country tells them that they want them to censor the people. I remember the first time that happened when Google agreed, and I was like shocked. I was in shock that they would agree to that. And prior to that, they'd been very, no way, we're not going to censor our search. We're not, no way, because that would compromise the search. And then of course they got taken over by SJW managers. And then they agreed to censor the search for, I forget, it was like in Europe somewhere.
Do you have any doubt that the SJW community in this country would not use a system like this in a heartbeat if they could?
Yeah, they would love to crush us.
They love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. I mean, this is
And
digital
China's
socialism.
like, this is what we're doing. We're fine.
Fascism.
And the guy who's implementing this just appointed himself permanent president. So, this is like, what scares me about this is how by making China rich, we've allowed them to build a system that actually will crush their people like no one has ever been able to crush people before.
Yeah, that's truly scary.
I mean, they will. Let me just read you this thing. First of all, it's just in testing right now. While the social credit scheme will become mandatory in China in 2020, it is currently being tested in pilot schemes which have been rolled out through private financial companies. The most high profile of these is Sesame Credit, which has been developed by Ant Financial and uses computer algorithms to score people. So you get like this credit score, and that's based on your social media habits, but also it's based on, because it appears the authoritarian one-party state believes that someone who plays PlayStation or Xbox is an idle person. So it's not, it's even like, are you playing PlayStation? Oh, you get a couple points knocked off your credit score.
So
Unless you're a good little commie soldier.
Yeah. Imagine how that will
blacklisted.
change behavior. You think North
Oh my God.
Koreans have it bad?
Yeah.
Like they're controlled in this way without a digital footprint.
Right.
Imagine the digital footprint giving China. I mean, this is so out of a dystopian movie like Minority Report or like one of these movies where every
Like
movie
Black
you make
Mirror.
is tracked.
Yeah, absolutely. The argument for dealing and trading with China, which goes back, I guess, to Nixon in the 70s, was by trading with them, it'll foster, this
Freedom.
openness, which will eventually lead to
Our
their
ideas
own
will
citizens.
rub off on them, and they'll become
Yeah.
free. Yeah.
And then we heard over the last 10 or 20 years, well, look what's happening. China's more capitalist than the United States, and their government is kind of a joke to them. People just figure out how to get around them, And for the most part, this is a very kind of capitalist-oriented country, and their culture's changing to be more freedom-loving and more entrepreneurial and that kind of thing. But then you see something like this, and you say, like to your point before, Sonny, where you said we've essentially made them rich by allowing them to trade with us and to buying their products and moving our manufacturing there. We've enriched their society and their people, and they have too by work. Their people work very hard for that, but at the same time, without any sort of pushback on the Communist Party there, now they can implement this sort of dystopian Big Brother scheme, which is frightening.
With a permanent president as well. So now we've got a dictatorship with probably hereditary, we're back to Mao. Only Mao has a modern day Ed Snowden NSA style ability to monitor his citizens.
Well, and they have a massive military. I mean, if you follow some of the headlines of
we
some
paid
of the
for that
technology.
too.
Yeah, I mean, the technology that they're developing is pretty frightening too, from a military standpoint.
Give an example.
Oh well, they have obviously have nuclear weapons, but they've been developing some aircraft that I think are I think the aircraft, they said it could go around the world in an hour or something like that. They have this new hypersonic aircraft. So
isn't there's definitely, they are definitely unapologetically pouring money into defeating our military systems, like our defense systems and things like that. And meanwhile, under Obama, we spent 8 years apologizing for our, strength, doing these crazy rules of engagement and cutting military budgets. And, we don't think that we should build nukes and like all this stuff. I mean, yeah. So we're just getting weaker. We really are in like the fall. We're in the Roman fall right now.
Yeah, I agree.
We're like Google. We're cutting our throats, and somebody will emerge.
Yeah, I think someone's gonna win.
Someone's gonna win. That's right. So we can segue this into the last topic that I wanted to talk about was tariffs. And for those of you out there, you got to go read Doug's blog, The Rational Capitalist. It's at ratcap.com. But Doug is a specialist in economics, and so I wanted to talk about tariffs. But I wanted to start out that all of my we travel in some libertarian objectivist type circles, and tariffs are bad. Like first of all, you don't want taxes. You don't want freedom restriction. You definitely don't want the government to have the ability to, as they say, pick winners and losers. And, there have been tariffs where they're favors given to industries and executives, and it's caused stagnation in those industries. It's caused, the kind of thing that Google's doing. They're just too rich. They don't have competition, so they're too rich. They don't have to try. They don't care about their customers. Like, that is definitely the result of tariffs. Like, free trade is always better in that sense. Like, competition creates incentives to do better. And however, politics is not, the right way to think about politics is not that trade and capitalism are the primary. And this is kind of an idea that I don't think I fully embraced this 5 years ago. As much more like, here are my principles, I'm for capitalism, so anything that falls under that bucket is good. And I'm not saying I'm not for capitalism, I am, but I think that the proper way to view capitalism is that it's freedom, but you still have these other things. Limited government, you're still giving the government some power. And there's a tension there. And, between your freedom and that power. And in there somewhere is your safety. So you need your rights protected, so you have to have a government. Anarchy doesn't work. So you have to give up some of your power. And that doesn't necessarily fall into the freedom bucket, right? I mean, so I look at things now. You've got to look at the full context. You have to look at the history. You have to understand the situation and how the thing is being implemented. So it's not just cut and dry to say, oh, trade, therefore, like we were just talking about China. Trade with China is always good. Well, that's not really true.
Right.
And it's not always the best thing for me. If we're talking about a self-interested foreign policy, it's not for Sonny and all the other Americans. It's not necessarily in our best interest to have open and full trade with China. And at one time in the history of our government, because of human rights violations and those types of things, because they're an enemy, a stated, declared enemy of ours, we didn't want to trade with them because we regarded that as dangerous.
Right.
So there are reasons why you would cut off trade. You cut off trade with enemies. You cut off trade with people that, you can't sell certain technologies to Russia. If you're Lockheed Martin, you can't just sell whatever you've got over to Russia because some of that would be, treason, basically.
Unless you give money to the Clinton Foundation, then you can do whatever you want.
Right. So I think there are some obvious examples of when trade is not the primary, that the safety of the American people or the best interest of the American people is the primary. And with that said, so Trump has just imposed a couple of tariffs on steel and aluminum.
He's proposing to.
Oh, he's proposing to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. They haven't done it yet.
Doug.
Well, I think you're right in that context is everything when you're talking about something like tariffs. And, it's not true necessarily that, all trade between every country is necessarily in our self-interest. Like you gave the example of, we embargo Cuba. We don't trade with North Korea. We didn't trade with the Russians when they were the Soviet Union. For a long time, we didn't trade with China. And all that changed over time as our policies have changed. And, those have had very probably controversial effects in some cases, like we're just talking about with China. But to specifically what he's proposing, Trump is proposing a 25% tariff, which is a tax on imported steel, and I think a 10% tax on imported aluminum. And I personally think the way he's proposing this is actually horrible. There is a more reasonable way about going about it, and I'll get into that in a second. But the first thing is if you're concerned about trading with China, the fact is China, I think, is not even in the top 10. They're probably the 10th largest steel exporter to the United States. The number one steel exporter to the United States is Canada, followed by Brazil, South Korea, Mexico, Russia, and so on. So, and I believe Canada is also the biggest aluminum exporter. I think 56% of our aluminum is exported from Canada. So this is essentially a tax that he's proposing very specifically on these two things.
So it's specifically to protect the industries and jobs. Isn't that pretty much the motivator? It's not about, preventing enemies from becoming stronger.
That's right.
Or in the case of aluminum and steel, I could see saying these are essential industries for defense.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That's not really the case here at all. Where you're saying, hey, we have to protect some domestic industry that has something to do with national defense, or we specifically want to go after a country like North Korea or China that we consider to be an imminent threat to us, and we don't want to enrich them in any way or deal with them or enhance them in any way. So this is really something that it's funny because it specifically will hurt Canada and Mexico to some extent, but actually who it's going to hurt the most is Americans. And let me get into just the mechanics of this. First of all, there's about 200,000 people that work in the steel industry in the United States. There's about 6.5 million people that are employed in businesses that use steel. So if you imagine steel, the steel tariff going into place, and the price of steel essentially gets raised 25%, well, that might be good for a domestic steel producer, who can charge 25% more, but it means that 10 times as many people or more, really like 30 times as many companies, are going to have to pay 25% more to buy steel. So if you're Whirlpool and you manufacture appliances using steel and aluminum, well, your costs just went up by 25%. And while that benefits the domestic steel company, it's going to hurt more people than it actually helps. And the other thing about this tariff, and this is a real practical thing we have to think through, is a tariff could be imposed right now, and in 3 years it might go away. In 5 years it might go away. So if you're a domestic steel company and suddenly steel prices are 25% higher, you can charge 25% more because your competition suddenly their prices are 25% more. Are you really going to go and invest in more capital and equipment in the United States to expand your factory, knowing that in 2, 3, 4 years, if a new administration comes in, they might drop the tariffs? You're not going to do that. You're going to wait and see. And so all you're going to do is increase your prices and make a bigger profit. And over the next couple of years.
Over time, too, I think a tariff that's too high could end up destroying a market. So, like, for example, if you force McDonald's to pay a $15 minimum wage, you force them to automate a whole bunch of positions. And when, let's say, you now eliminate the minimum wage, they're not going to go back to people.
Right.
They've already got the machines.
Because it takes years and years of planning to, the people that think, well, this is immediately going to, people are going to just start building steel mills in the United States. No, they're not. I mean, they'd have to, if they said, yes, we're going to impose this tariff for 30 years or 50 years and it's never going to change, maybe that would happen. But these laws can change. So when you're not really basing capital investment decisions on economics, but you're basing them on the capriciousness of political policy, I don't think many people are going to, take that to the bank. So what's going to really happen is prices are going to go up for everybody.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you're Whirlpool, what are you going to do? Suddenly your input prices are more. Well, you're more likely to then go and manufacture.
Look at plastics.
No, you're probably more likely to just move your company or your manufacturing to another country where you can buy the steel cheaper, and then there's no tax or there's no tariff on a washing machine. The tariff is on steel.
Right.
So then if you're Whirlpool, go make your washing machine in China, and now you import the washing machine back to the United States. So you just shutter any factory that's really dependent on aluminum or steel as an input. You would be looking to probably shut down your factory, to lay people off, to manufacture your product in some other location.
And that's kind of more of a permanent change too. Once you move your operations to Mexico or China, why would you come back? You've already got your stuff going on there and you've got a good deal. And unless one of those countries did something to screw you, you just stay.
And to the extent that a company says, okay, we're just going to stay here and we're going to just pay more money for this. Well, their prices are going to have to go up, which means it's essentially a tax on Americans. So instead of us paying less money to, for these goods, we're just going to pay more money. So it's essentially just a tax on everybody. It also stimulates or helps stimulate inefficiency. I mean, to the extent that these other companies around the world can produce steel cheaper, let them produce steel cheaper. Why would we want to pay more to subsidize, in essence, a less efficient domestic steel manufacturer? Now, if a country is utilizing slave labor, for example, and that allows them to produce steel much cheaper, and I could say, okay, hey, we're not going to trade with that country. They're using slave labor, and not only are they oppressing their people, they're able to essentially charge nothing for these products because they're utilizing slave labor. That's not really what this is. Again, China, Canada, and Brazil and South Korea are our biggest are the biggest exporters of steel into the United States. So,
Yeah, we're not
China's
talking
way
slave
down that
labor.
list.
Yeah.
We're not talking slave labor here. We're really just talking about steel and aluminum. And now, let me go back and say why this is actually, the idea of a tariff is not a horrible idea. In fact, the United States funded its government by tariff in the 19th century. And the reason why we went away from tariffs in the first place, and again, let's say we have tariffs across the board on everything. So you don't, and this is to your point, Sonny, before, where you don't pick winners and losers. You don't say steel and aluminum because it has all sorts of unintended consequences that are negative. If you just had essentially like a sales tax, a tariff on all imported goods, and there was no favoritism, that's essentially what we did in the 19th century. And the reason why what happened was people were saying, well, that's unfair, because everyone's got to pay this tax, and the tax falls hardest on the people that make the least amount of money because everyone's got to essentially pay this 5% tax on imported goods. So let's stop the tariffs and we're going to impose an income tax, but that income tax will just be on the rich people. So now no tariffs, but we're going to have and this is 1913 now.
Right.
We're going to impose this income tax, but don't worry, everybody. This income tax, it's just going to be on the 1%ers.
It's not even that.
Really
It was like
super rich people.
0.0006% of the population paid the first tax.
This is on Carnegie and Rockefellers.
Right.
They're going to pay the tax, and now the common man who pays this tariff, he's going to save 5%, which means a lot to him because he doesn't make as much money. And of course, what happened was, once the income tax got into place, that enabled the government to essentially steal more and more and more and more to the point where we are now, where everyone's paying an income tax, an exorbitant income tax, and now on top of that, we're going to have tariffs. So if you said to me, hey, we're going to get rid of the income tax and we're going to replace it with a tariff on imported goods, I'd say great. That's a much better, if you're going to tax people,
yeah,
that's a much better way to do it.
It's better if it's not favoritism, though, because I could see that, like, if the president thankfully we have all these checks and balances, so nothing happens quickly. But if the president were able to just be like, a tariff on this, a tariff on that, a tariff, but not on this, I'm going to take this one away tomorrow and put this one on Saturday, like, that would actually wreak havoc in our economy.
Yeah.
The chaos would just be impossible to follow. It would destroy investment. And so it can't be like that. It has to be much more uniform and across the board. Right. And I think the only exceptions to that would be security reasons. You could potentially, but you don't need a tariff. You could just say you cannot trade steel and aluminum with a slave-producing country like China. It's just not happening because steel and aluminum is an essential industry. We're fine with competition, but we're not fine with China subsidizing their steel industry to destroy ours. Like, because a country could do that. An enemy could say, I'm going to take down the U.S. steel market. I'm going to subsidize our steel manufacturing 100% and trade open with them on it, and we'll just crush their whole steel industry. An enemy could do that. So there would have to be that exception. But other than that, it'd have to be uniform. And then get rid of the income tax. But to your point, these taxes just keep stacking. And so that's interesting. I didn't know that tariff argument took place back in the income tax days. And now we have both. And now, of course, you hear a lot in the last 5 years about this VAT tax that we're supposed to have, or let's go to a consumer tax and away from an income tax. But meanwhile, they're not repealing the income tax. So it's just like, okay, you're just looking for new ways to tax the shit out of me.
Right. And
that's why they're destroying my wealth with currency inflation.
Right. Yeah, you're getting hit through inflation, through taxation. I mean, the real way if the United States government cares about allowing our companies to compete, then liberate them. Let's repeal income and corporate taxes. Let's repeal all the regulations, and let people compete fairly and with legitimate trading partners. Like in air quotes, countries unlike North Korea or real security
or
threats.
Cuba or whatever. Right. Let's not
that-
forget
that you
Cuba
rely-
pointed missiles at fucking Florida, and they're 90 miles away. That's why we
right.
don't trade with Cuba. But
there's
now,
a
of course, we do
concept
trade with Cuba.
in economics, there's a concept called comparative advantage, which essentially says you should focus on the thing that you're best at. So if we're trading with Costa Rica, it could be the case that America is actually better than Costa Rica at making bananas. But if we're better or Costa Rica can't make semiconductor chips, even though we're better than Costa Rica at bananas, we should still let them do bananas and we'll make the semiconductor chips because we're comparatively better than them because they can't make semiconductor chips.
Right.
So there's a whole concept in economics called comparative advantage. And, that works, when we neglect the security threat kind of issue or, something like the uranium industry or some strategic mineral or something like that. That's true. And you want as free trade as possible. And if some company's really good at making steel, then great, let them make steel. Because if we can import cheaper steel and we pay less for steel, that gives us money to go do other things and buy other things. If we pay more for steel now, if more of each of our budgets is going to go towards paying more for washing machines and whatever else, copper wire and everything else, then we're going to have less money to spend on going to the movie or going to a restaurant or whatever else, we're going on vacation. So to the extent that they essentially tax us and just make us pay more money on all this stuff over here, it means we can't buy this stuff over there. So you're picking a winners and a losers, or you're picking winners and losers. The steel company will be happy, because they'll probably have a higher profit in the short run. But everyone
Again,
else
it's
is
so
going to
short
pay
term.
subsidize them.
It's like the insurance companies wanting Obamacare. These businessmen are idiots.
Yeah, they just care about, and they're not, because they're responding to what they need to do to, enhance their own benefit in a sense.
But it's so short term. I mean, the insurance companies supporting Obamacare, knowing that the way it was written, it would just kind of crush their ability to even produce products for people. They knew that. They've got actuarials that can run those numbers. They know what's going to happen. And they're all failing now, or they're slashing all their policies and stuff.
It's a problem with the mixed economy. Is there's a dilemma in there because on the one hand, in reality, you're competing with other companies that might, in the short run, be taking advantage of a subsidy of some kind. So if you're the one with the big picture thinking, to some extent, you can probably take a long-term approach and maybe preserve a business. On the other hand, these incentives are there. Your competition is taking advantage of them. So, maybe you go out of business if you don't. But stuff like this is going to put, again, there's 200,000 people in the steel industry. There's 6.5 million people in industries that use steel and aluminum.
Yeah, so this is a
what
dumb
about those
tariff.
people?
This is a crappy,
This is a dumb
dumb
idea.
tariff. But we're not against
This is
tariffs necessarily.
No, if you're gonna in a certain context, if you're gonna get rid of income tax and we're gonna go to a tariff, I think it's probably the best way to fund the government, the way we did in the 19th century. Also, It implies we have a much smaller government because the amount of tariffs. I think I read there's like 2.5 million in trade, so you'd have to have a smaller government budget, which would also be great. But what they're proposing is keep the income tax, keep every other tax. Just let's add a new tax. And by the way, some of these even these countries that essentially subsidize their industries domestically to give us a lower price, in a way that's a benefit to us. I mean, if they're going to hurt themselves to give us a lower price, that's not so bad either. I mean, if we get a cheap thing.
I think it would depend. It would depend on the global context. Are they doing it to crush an industry so that we're at a disadvantage somehow later? Is it, is it like a
right?
What's going on? And if
I agree with that.
So,
as a general principle, like if you assume it's not strategically important in some vital way, then essentially what they're doing is hurting themselves to give us cheap stuff.
Yeah.
And so, okay, that's great, but again, like you said, it's more complicated than that. Britain does that. I'm fine with it. If you want to hurt yourselves to give us cheap tea or something like that, great. But, if a country has a long-term plan where they're going to essentially enslave their population to crush one of our strategically vital industries or something,
right.
It's something you have to look at. I don't think that's what's going on here. In this case, I think it's just Trump saying, I want a bargaining chip to renegotiate
the reason we know
some of these trade
it's not going on here is it's Canada, Mexico, Brazil. And I find it really interesting that there's sort of this shrill, like, oh, these are essential industries if we went to war, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, with all of these other countries manufacturing, creating steel or whatever, I don't think we have to worry. Like, if Mexico won't sell it to us, Brazil will. If Brazil won't, Canada will. It's
right.
Where you have this world where everybody is doing it, and you have 10 other people selling to you besides China. Even if China wanted to crush, even if our steel industry gets crushed, it's so readily available around the world. The chance of us not being able to get our hands on the steel we need is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's not that. If anyone I don't think anyone's even arguing
I've seen that. No, I have seen that. No.
Okay.
Yeah. Knee-jerk.
Well, China's 2.9. China's
protectionist
2.9%.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Well, thanks very much for enlightening us on that issue. Can you believe it's been an hour? That's it for our show today. Oh, yes. You can, Doug. It was boring for you.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it's not for the listeners. Thank you, Doug and Ashley. Go check out Doug's blog, The Rational Capitalist, at ratcap.com. As I said before, thanks everybody out there for joining us. This podcast and all my work is fan-funded right now. If you join my elite squad, you'll get access to our private Facebook group. We have mugs, we have t-shirts. If you'd like to be an elite House of Sunny squad member, go over to patreon.com/House of Sunny, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the House of Sunny podcast. Go check out Sunny on YouTube at her channel, House of Sunny. Everything Sunny does is fan-funded, and because she's likely to get kicked off and demonetized on every platform at some point, please support her over at patreon.com/House of Sunny. Become one of Sunny's elite squad and have access to behind-the-scenes footage, t-shirts, special events, and more.